if you were watching us cover the Walt Disney Company earnings call live last week on Wednesday, August 9th, you probably heard CEO Bob Iger discuss a number of write-offs and write-downs. In fact, that total impairment charge reached north of $2 billion. The bulk of it coming from basically throwing away completed content that was on DTC, or direct-to-consumer, mostly places like Disney Plus. And now Lucasfilm adds to its tally of jettisoned, failed projects that Disney has written off, and it's now crossed the $500 million mark in Lucasfilm failures to this point. Let me show you how. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's great to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. By now, many of you have heard the story that Willow was thrown off of Disney Plus, and that Disney would be taking a write-off on the show that nobody watched. This show was a total bomb fest, a complete failure on Disney Plus, and another in a long line for Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. But what we didn't have until recently were the actual financials. How much did Disney spend on creating this flop? Well, here it is from our friend Caroline Reed at Forbes magazine, the abandoned streaming series that cost Disney $100 million. Now, I'll caution you before we get into this, that $100 million is not the final figure. As we've recently reported from another article in Forbes, there's still a great deal of the production costs that have yet to be reported on this. But let's go through the story. Disney's revealed that it spent $106 million, or about 83 million British pounds sterling, on making Willow, which they acquired the rights to when it bought Lucasfilm from George Lucas for $4.05 billion back in 2012. Now, as a reminder, as we've covered in the past, most of the time you can't get information on what these kind of projects cost, but because budgets of streaming shows are usually confidential, as studios combine them in their overall expenses and don't itemize how much they spend on each one. However, shows made in the United Kingdom are exceptions, and Willow is one of them. It benefited from the UK's television tax relief scheme, which allows studios to claim a cash reimbursement of up to 25% of the money they spend there. Now, you've heard us talk about that before when we covered the financial releases of certain films like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, more recently Doctor Strange, or how about Guardians of the Galaxy. We also looked at shows that are from Lucasfilm as well, like The Acolyte, which is due out on Disney Plus next year, 2024. They recently released a tax return, or a financial return in the UK, showing that pre-production alone for The Acolyte was somewhere close to $50 million US. And of course, some of that is reimbursable by the UK government under the film tax credit. So the big reason that studios do productions in the UK is to get that film tax credit. So if you want to spend $200 million on filming a show or a movie in the UK, you can do it and leverage that money up to, say, $250 million in some cases, meaning that your dollars will stretch further because the UK taxpayer is going to help you along the way. The UK regulations state that each TPC, that's television production company, must be, quote, responsible for pre-production, principal photography, and post-production of the television program, and for delivery of the completed program. Key, and for delivery of the completed program, meaning these shows actually have to get released in order for somebody like Disney to maintain that tax credit and not have to cough it back up to the British government. Accordingly, there is no doubt that their financial statements show all of the costs of each series. It isn't even possible for the studios to hide costs in other companies, as the law also states that, quote, there can be only one TPC in relation to a program. So in other words, trying to shift costs around and spending money here or there, or moving funds around, or taking funds from one production and moving it to another would violate the UK rules. It would make it very difficult for them to receive film tax credits, and the British government monitors this rather closely to make sure that nobody's fiddling with the system. The TPCs also usually have code names so they don't raise attention, and in the case of Willow, it was Barking Lion Productions Limited in the UK. It recently filed financial statements for the 17 months through December 31st, 21, which covers pre-production and filming. Those incurred costs of roughly $106 million, and the tally is set to soar in the next set of financial statements. They should show the bulk of expenses for post-production work, which was led by the London office of Lucasfilm's Industrial Lights and Magic, or ILM. Now, we recently saw reports come out in the last 24 hours that the Walt Disney Company has decided to shutter the Singapore office of Industrial Lights and Magic. This is why they shuttered that one and not the one in the UK. The one in the UK is too lucrative to them because of the tax credit incentives there for the work they can produce in post-production for things like CGI or VFX and get that lucrative 25% back. The net spending on the show for Willow was reduced by about $20 million. That was a cash reimbursement for filming in the UK, but it doesn't stop there. Lucasfilm chose to film Willow in Wales, a country within the UK which offers additional fiscal incentives to studios. The local government there gave Lucasfilm an additional $5.1 million in a grant for bringing the net spending on Willow down to about $80.4 million. So $80 million is what Disney spent in the net. That's after they received a big tax credit back, about $25 million US dollars worth in tax credits back from the British taxpayer and the UK government. But again, that does not include a massive amount of post-production. And on an 8-episode show, and let's say it had roughly 30 minutes per episode, that's 4 hours of finished photography work. That is a lot of post-production. And of course, the VFX and everything else go into that. This show is easily going to climb its way to closer to $150 million when it's all said and done. We've seen this comparably with things like Secret Invasion that finished up at $212 million. And what we're thinking with The Acolyte, based on pre-production costs alone, that one would easily be over $200 million, maybe approaching $250 million when all said and done. To give you an idea of how big this production was, it was based at Dragon Studios in South Wales, filmed at 32 different locations across the country. Lucasfilm built 5 sets at Dragon Studios, totaling nearly 30,000 square feet, as well as 20 additional buildings for the purposes of creature creation, puppeteering work, special effects, and costumes. So as we've been saying, the Walt Disney Company has a serious spending problem. These productions are out of hand for what they're getting back in return. The viewership isn't there. The box office just simply isn't there. And quite frankly, a lot of these studios seem to have a lot of frivolous spending activities, just buying stuff or hosting events for employees, just things that don't need to be happening, especially right now on a belt-tightening timeline that Disney is on. They've already committed to $5.5 billion of cost cuts, and I can promise you that number is probably going to go up. You're going to want to make sure you stay tuned for WDW Pro's video in a little while here. He's going to go into some more detail on what he's heard that's going on at Lucasfilm and some of the belt-tightening that's happening there and some of the frivolous spending at that studio. But don't think it's just limited to Lucasfilm. I'm sure we'll see the same things at Pixar, Marvel, Disney Animation, and so on. Now, when we take Willow, and if we assume that's going to come in around $150 million, and we add it to the infamous Galactic Starcruiser. Now, this article here says about $250 million. It's going to be more than that. I think that's the figure that is cumulative to date. There's still another fiscal quarter here for Disney to report for the fiscal year of 2023. That ends on September 30th, and Disney will likely take the rest of it by that time. So we'll hear about that in the earnings call in November. But that hotel reportedly cost around $350 to $400 million to build and complete. And that puts the final tally, to this point at least, of Lucasfilm failures that Disney has literally shut down or thrown out the window at about $500 million. That is failure theater, folks. You have to start asking yourself, if you haven't already, was Kennedy's vision of Star Wars really the right one for the Walt Disney Company? And how much longer are they actually going to stay committed to it? Unfortunately, I think they're sort of stubborn in their ways, at least for now. And if Kennedy does indeed have her retirement announced here in the next couple of months, which looks like it's becoming more and more likely from what we're hearing, her contract is up next year. Contract renegotiations for her are beginning, from what we've heard, sometime this week or next. That may well include a retirement package, a very gracious one for Miss Kennedy, where she and her husband are now in their 70s, and as we also recently reported, just sold a Malibu home they purchased back in 2015 after the purchase of Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall, to that point, had been living in Northern California. She grew up there, and quite frankly, that's where Lucasfilm is based, in San Francisco in the Bay Area. If Kathy isn't working with the Walt Disney Company anymore, it's probably unlikely she needs to keep a couple of houses in the Los Angeles area to stay near the actual corporate headquarters. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe. And until next time, take care.